Hi everybody, this is the Kai Dragon Gardening and Cooking channel, and I'm Ann, and today I'm going to talk to you about some common mistakes that we as gardeners make in our garden. And any mistake you make can be corrected. It just takes a little bit of determination on your part to do what's right to make your garden a success. So one of the first things that you need to remember is you want to make sure that you have healthy soil when you start out. You want to check the pH level of your soil. You can get test kits, they're reasonably cheap, just to see what your levels are at. Different plants kind of want different levels. Some of your berry plants are more acid level loving plants. They like the acidy soil, and you have to treat the soil different with them. You use more bark. They're not really soil oriented. There's different ways of planting them. So anyway, make sure that you're making rich, well-draining soil before you plant anything into it. Don't use a leaf blower on your garden bed, especially when fall is here. Doing this can blow off the topsoil and cause soil compaction. You don't want that. Instead, you're better off leaving some of those natural leaves on your garden bed and letting them put nutrients back into the soil, because over time when they break down, that's what they will do. So when fall gets here and you're starting to slow down on production and taking one bed and getting it winterized, if you have some natural leaves on there, just leave them there. They're not going to hurt anything. They're going to break down. What you should do at that point is probably add some compost. There's a lot of places that you can buy compost already made up and stuff. Sometimes they'll even deliver it if you're buying a large supply. So check with some of your compost companies if you have one near you. We are lucky where we're at that we found a place that has awesome compost. And since we found them, I have been regularly using them every time I'm adding a soil mix to any of my grow bags or the beds or anything. Compost is a wonderful thing to add to any of your soil mixture. And some people like using just a regular Pro Mix, even as a starter mix, because it's real fine dirt, and it works great in any type of the stacking towers and stuff. But if you're doing your garden beds and stuff, and Pro Mix can get pretty costly, you can mix your topsoil and your sphagnum peat moss with your compost and get a really good, well-draining soil with that. And like I said, your natural leaves, they break down and they are just incredible because they'll add the nutrients back into your soil. So you don't want to neglect your garden weeds either. That is something that you got to be vigilant about, pulling them by hand. Don't be using chemicals. The herbicides can cause damage to the surrounding plants. They also hurt the soil microorganisms. So you want to make sure that you're just hand pulling them. And what I like to do is take like a 5-gallon bucket when I'm at the garden bed, and because if I have really rich soil, if it gets too wet, we have a problem with mushrooms that like to grow in there, and that is because if it's very, very fertile, and very rich, they will form, and you want to get them out all the way down to the roots. And I don't want them going back into the garden bed, so I put that stuff in a 5-gallon bucket and then put it in a bag, so that way it's not going back into my composter. And some people use a mushroom compost, but the type that grow in the garden are not what we usually recommend. They get very slimy and very nasty, and usually nothing else wants to grow there. So you can try the baking soda trick, but too much baking soda will also cause you to have areas where nothing's going to grow at all. So over time, that's not a good choice. I've kind of found that out the hard way. I've read an article and said, oh, use baking soda, and we tried it, and too much is not a good thing. So it's something that you want to remember, you know, that just get rid of it. Don't put it in your compost. Another thing with keeping the weeds down, if you get some smaller plants that you can plant to naturally suppress your weed growth, a lot of things that's worked really good, like I mentioned, strawberries, onions, basil, garlic, bush beans. Bush beans will actually add nutrients back to your soil. Your marigolds, your zinnias, your nasturtiums, those are really good flowers to help get rid of pests and stuff, and also work good for a weed barrier. They're smaller plants. Plant those in between, you know, areas where you've got a lot of weeds coming up and stuff. Put those marigolds in the ground and let them take over. That way you don't have to be pulling weeds all the time, because you need to have your pollinator plants, and the pollinators do love the zinnias and the marigolds and stuff. And you want to make sure that you're putting pollinator plants between your garden beds. You want to attract your bees and your butterflies, not the white butterfly that goes around and laying the eggs, and then you've got the caterpillars and all the other nasty stuff that goes with it. But your ladybugs, if you can get them in your garden, they're wonderful. They will help keep the aphids down, and that is a natural protectant right there. Ladybugs are very, very hard to get and very hard to come by, and if you see one or two in the garden, you're lucky. I like to provide little bug houses and things for them, so they have a place that they can go if they're, you know, not feeding on the plants and stuff. You can get ladybug houses and stuff pretty cheap, but so it's something to remember, that you want to make sure that you've got a place they can go for protection. Make sure that you're picking a variety of plant that's going to grow well in your garden environment. Some plants are going to bolt because it's too hot in your area, but if you can find varieties of plants that are grown in similar climates, you're going to have better luck. You might need to mix some hybrid plants with your heirlooms, but don't plant the wrong plant in the wrong place. I mean, that's one of the big mistakes a lot of times gardeners make. So do a little bit of research when you're planting something, and try new things. You know, sometimes there's vegetables out there that we've never ate before. We don't know what they taste like, but you can find all kinds of recipes, and a lot of times things that they planted in the European states, or you know, back in the Middle East, in Africa, you know, in your desert areas, and different areas for different climates. Kind of do the research, see what kind of stuff they plant in those areas. And if you are in an area where, like the dead of heat, you know, during the summer, it gets so blazing hot, even with the shade cloth, when it can melt plastic down to nothing. You know, when you get several days of those 100-degree temperatures, you want to make sure you planted some things that are going to grow well so you're not disappointed. So do a little bit of research and plant some things that are a little out of the norm. See how they do for you, and you might be surprised with what you can get. Make sure that you're doing the right spacing though on your plants. Give them the space that they need for the growth that they need. That's why they tell you when you plant root crops like your radishes and your beets and your carrots, that you plant the seeds. The seeds are so small that sometimes they're too close together, and they tell you 2-inch spacing or better. And then you're spreading those seeds out, and lo and behold, they're so close, and you have to go through and pull the extra ones out of there, so that way they're not so crowded. You can pull them out, replant them if you want to. Some people just pull them out because they'll plant a lot of seeds. So, I mean, I've known people that have thrown 1,000 seeds in a 6-foot garden bed before, and that's way too many carrot seeds. They start coming up, and they're so crowded. What you're going to get is little teeny tiny spindles of a carrot that they don't have room to grow. Same thing with your radishes. You're going to pull up the leaves, and you're going to have a little spindle there and say, oh my God, that's what I grew, because they didn't have that room. There wasn't the spacing for that plant to grow. So make sure that you're giving your plants the space they need for the growth they're going to need. So that's another thing it's a big mistake that gardeners make. Watering, make sure it's not too dry and not too wet. You can get test kits that'll tell you exactly whether the soil is too wet or too dry, and if it's too wet, obviously you're not going to water. If it's too dry, you want to get the watering hose out if you don't already have a sprinkler system set in. We didn't do a sprinkler system this year. We may consider doing something like that next year, because now that I'm retired and I enjoy gardening as much as I do, I will probably help my son do more of it, and I really enjoy his gardening channel and being able to help people have success with their garden. It's a good feeling when someone tells you, hey, I learned this from you and this done really well for me. It just makes you feel good that you helped someone else be successful with something. So I enjoy it, but watering too little is not good for your plants, and overwatering definitely is not good for them at all. I mean, you're drowning them out. You're going to kill them. If your leaves are withering up and they're just shriveling up, you usually need to test, because it is probably too dry and that plant needs a little drink. So remember, it's dependent on you for its survival. It'll go into survival mode, and especially if it has to, if there's no choice and you can't water, and it'll shut down before it goes into, oh, I just can't make it mode. But watering is very important. So remember, overwatering is not good and underwatering is not good. So do the finger test. Put your finger down in that soil, see if you get any dirt on your finger, or if it comes back and you get a little bit of dirt. Make sure that it's just not too wet or too dry. Sunshine, we know our plants need, most of the time they need at least a good 6 to 8 hours of sunshine. A lot of times maybe not direct, but most plants need that sun. Several cloudy days in a row are usually not good. you know that they start looking kind of bad when you have several rainy days in a row and stuff. So your plants, they need that natural sun. So make sure that you are planting your stuff in areas that are going to get the sun that they need. And it's a good idea to kind of research when you're putting your garden beds down how the sun is. Just, you know, kind of look, watch the shadows, see how many hours the sun is in that particular spot, so that way you kind of know how much sun that plant is probably going to get, or if it's going to be in a more shady area. That way you know to plant your more shady area plants in that area as to something that's getting a whole lot of direct sun. So we've got an area that's kind of shaded a little bit by the pear tree, but it gets a lot of sun coming in, you know, so everything seems to do pretty good in that spot, except for the ground really needs to be amended, and we'll do that a lot this next coming year. And then we had a lot of pests this year in the garden to help themselves to things before they were not quite ready, you know, and stuff, but they were ready for them, just not us. So like our watermelon and our corn, and it's too late in the season to plant more, so we're, you know, just kind of learning. You know, there's not a whole lot you can do when you have raccoons and other creatures visiting. I do know that you can put Vaseline on the fence and it'll keep the squirrels from running across it, because they slip and slide off of there. So there's some things that you can do to deter some of the other type of pests that are going to get in there. But like I said, make sure that you're looking to see how much sun your plant's going to get. Make sure that also, along with the water and the sun, that your younger plants, you're watering them more often. And if you planted trees, make sure that when you're watering them, that you water them deep. Give them a good soaking. And that's not an everyday thing, but they just need to be watered deep when you water them. Another thing that is a big mistake in the garden is a lot of people don't use mulch. You do need to use some kind of mulch, whether it is wood chips or straw or something, because it brings down the level of pests, and it also protects the ecosystem of the garden. But it doesn't let your dirt dry out so fast, so you don't have to water so often, especially if you are going through a drought situation where you can't water every day. So mulching is very important. You do want to remember, though, if you're planting or you're mulching around trees, that you don't want to be putting those 2 or 3 inches of mulch around the tree. What you want to do is build like a little trench with mulch around it, and then maybe a 1-inch layer. They don't want layers and layers of mulch right next to the base of the tree. So make you that little trench area for your trees. But make sure that you're mulching. It's going to help your plants, and you're going to be you can actually see the bugs a lot better. Like when we use the straw mulch, I can pinpoint those little nasty bugs a lot better, and some of them you can just squish with your fingers. So rather than having to use any kind of pesticides and stuff, I like to avoid using Sevin Dust and some of the other pesticides as much as possible, because I like to do everything as organically as I can. So it's better when you don't have to put that stuff on your plants. Another thing the plants depend on you for is fertilizing. You don't have to feed them all the time, but your plants do need fed. Rain is going to wash some nutrients away from the soil. So if you're getting a lot of rain, even though it's adding nitrogen, from the sky to the soil, it's also stripping out some of the other things that your plants need. So your natural fertilizers are better to use than your synthetics. I highly recommend using compost twice a year. Maybe I always say at the beginning of spring, when you're first planting, make sure that you're putting quite a bit of compost in your garden bed and taking your little garden tools and mixing that up really good into the soil. And then towards the end of the year, you want to do that again, or when your plants are really doing a lot of production and you notice a lot of fruit, make sure that you're putting a little more compost on there. It doesn't hurt. They need the nutrients that they're getting from the compost. Your green leafy plants, they need a lot of nitrogen. I've used the Alaska fish fertilizer. The only thing I don't like about any of the fish fertilizers is they draw flies. It attracts them so bad, other than the fishy smell. But the plants love that stuff. So it's a really good fertilizer to use. Cucumbers, they really like it. It's just something that the plants need. Calcium and magnesium, if you're using fertilizers that have a lot of that, it helps with that blossom end rot that a lot of times you'll see. Tomatoes will get that sometimes, and you just want to make sure that you're having good compost and that you're feeding. And once you do start using fertilizer, whether you're using the natural fertilizer, and that it is best to use the natural. I like to switch off with the water soluble and the dry, like every 2 weeks, maybe use the water soluble one for one feeding, and then 2 weeks later use a dry type fertilizer. Some plants do better with others. Your berry plants seem to do better with the dry fertilizer, especially it's called Berrytone. And then sometimes there's an acidifier that works really well with blueberries and the blackberries and raspberries. And I'll add that a couple times a year during the growing season, especially when the plants are producing a lot of fruit. So just don't forget to fertilize. Don't over fertilize, if you're using too much, especially if you're using the synthetic type of fertilizer, because then it can do more harm than good to your plants. And you can kind of tell when you're feeding your plants if they're thriving and doing quite well and everything for you. Just don't overfeed them, don't overwater them. Use your judgment, but make sure that you are paying attention to your plants. They can't talk to you, but you can tell what they need. So, and like I said, there's different ways of testing to see what your plants do need. Also, another mistake in the garden, and probably one of the last things I'm going to talk about, is your timing. Make sure that you start planting the right plant at the right time. It's really important to look at your seed packets and look what the germination time is, and look what the time is for it to get to complete maturity, as to when you're going to be harvesting your fruit and this type of thing. Find out what your frost dates are in early spring and then again in the fall, so that way you have some idea of how many planting days you're actually going to have, especially when you're going into fall and you're planting your cold weather crops. You know, you need to know how many days before they're done. Some of them can actually tolerate the really cold temperatures, and they do make frost cloth and things that you can cover the plants up with. Some people have used, and I've done it too, where you've taken the hot caps or the plastic and made the tube for those and stuff to cover the plants, and it does work and it does help. But there are some things that you can't protect, and you have to look for other methods. So make sure you're checking to see when they're going to mature, and make sure that you're going to have enough days for that plant to reach full maturity, and you can get the fruit off of it that you need to get before it's time to end the season for that plant. Same way with your warm weather plants in the spring. And like I said, in the dead heat of summer, do some research. Grow some tropical veggies during the hottest part of the summer. Get them started in the first part of May, and that way when it's June and July, you know, they're going in full swing, and they can take the heat. And add more flowers to your garden with your vegetables. Like I said, the more flowers that you can add to the garden, the more you can bring in the pollinators. Just don't forget about leaving watering stations for your pollinators. You don't want to do anything that's going to make them drowned. So what I like to do is take shallow trays and line them with small rocks, and then just put the water to where they're touching the top of the rock, so that way your bees and monkeys and everything can land on top of the rocks and get a drink, and I don't have to worry about them drowning. And your hummingbird feeders make wonderful feeding stations for butterflies and stuff. And what you can do is you can take floss that you make things with, craft floss, not tooth floss, and tie a knot at one end of the floss. And what you're going to do is the holes in the flowers, put the string through the hole so that way it is down in the water solution, and then leave about an inch of the string come out through the flower on the outside, so it's actually making a watering device, so that way when they land on it they can get a drink off of that string. And that's how you feed them. And remember, when you're making your sugar water, it's 4 to 1. You don't want to use honey. In fact, honey is actually toxic to some creatures. It's just too rich for them, and they can't have honey. So just your regular sugar that you buy in the store, the white pure cane sugar, and a 4 to 1 mix. Mix it up, put it in the refrigerator, let it cool down, and make sure it's good and dissolved. And then you don't have to fill those feeders up all the way full. Just fill them up an inch or two, so that way there's solution down in the bottom of the thing, because every couple days you need to change that out, because you don't want it to get stale and no chance for bacteria or anything to grow in it, because then it's harmful to your bugs. So those are some of the mistakes that people make in the garden, and hopefully you'll do things the right way and you won't make those mistakes. It just takes a little bit of effort when you're out in the garden, but the garden should be one of your happiest places to go. It should bring you comfort and joy, and you should be proud of the things that you accomplish, and it should be a joy to be out there and give you some sense of peace when you're out there, knowing that you did that with the help of God, and you were successful at something, and you're doing something that maybe other people can't. So get out there, keep sowing and growing. I hope that you guys got something out of this video, and that you won't make some of the same mistakes. That these are common mistakes everybody makes, and we all get in a hurry, go on vacation, the garden's unattended, things happen. But get out there, give it your best shot, do some research, find some new things that you can plant that you might really enjoy. Get your children involved. Children love being out in the garden. They love exploring. And I got, a little wild and funky this year and decided to decorate the pear tree with wind chimes. And when it's kind of a nice breezy day, it's kind of neat to hear all the little sounds. And just brought some beauty to the tree, and now that the pears are gone. Anyway, you have a wonderful and blessed day. I appreciate you, and thank you for watching. Take care. Bye now.